y'all, so I've been getting a lot of questions about how I use picture books in my 5th grade classroom, so I thought I would just film a quick little video and share what I do and how I got started doing it and my process and just questions that you guys have had about it. So first off, the idea of the hashtag classroombookaday idea, program, whatever you want to call it, was created by a teacher named Jillian. I'm going to leave her info down below. There is a website. I think it's classroombookaday.com, but I'll leave it below too. Jillian has all of the information there. There's a Facebook group that's very good about showing different picture books that teachers have used in their classroom, so you'll definitely want to check it out. But all of the information about how she came up with the idea and the research behind it can be found on her account and her website, so be sure and check that out. In this video, I'm just going to share my experience with implementing this in my classroom. As always, what works for one classroom doesn't work for every classroom, so this is just my experience and my takeaway from it. So to start off with, Classroom Book a Day is basically where you read one picture book a day to your kids. I incorporated this into our beginning of class meeting so that it would become routine for the kids and for me. So each day after we finished our meeting, I would send the kids back to their seats, then I would instruct them to go to the rug where we would do our picture book read aloud for the day. I wanted our space to be close to the board, which I will show here. I wanted it to be close to that board so that the kids could see what we were reading that day and what read alouds were coming up through the rest of the week. As we did this, we also charted our favorites, which I'm going to do a little bit differently this year, but we charted our favorites, and I wanted the meeting to be centered around, the meeting area to be centered around that board, so it would all be together and we would be focused on the read aloud. So if you're wanting to do Classroom Book a Day in your classroom, I would suggest that you have a meeting board where you chart your read alouds and a rug close to that board so that it's all in one area. At the beginning, I didn't have the kids bring anything when they actually came to the rug. They just brought themselves and we sat down and we read a book. I wanted the main focus, and I still want the main focus, for them to enjoy the read aloud and to listen to the story. But as the year went on, I realized that this was valuable time that I could capitalize on just a little bit. So as the year went on, I had them bring their genre notebooks, and after we read the story, we would identify the genre of the story and record it in our notebook. We only did this after we read the read aloud. We did not do anything as I was reading the story. I always wanted the focus to be on the story and for them to just listen and enjoy the story. So while I read, they did nothing but listen. My number one goal in implementing this idea into the classroom and to use picture books in my upper grade classroom is for the kids to be exposed to more stories and for them to enjoy reading, whether that's chapter books or higher books or just picture books. I wanted them to enjoy what we were reading, so that was my number one goal in this, and that has never changed. I did want to make a little bit more use of the time, so that's why I incorporated genre notebooks. But again, I do not want to take anything away from actually enjoying the story and listening to the story. We only did that afterwards. After we read the story, we would record the genre in the genre notebook, and then we would discuss the story a little bit. We would talk about what the story was about. If it was one that led itself to theme, we would discuss the theme of the story. If there were any misconceptions, we cleared those up. We just discussed the story and what we thought about it. Now, like I said, I did this after the morning meeting, so altogether the morning meeting would take about 10 minutes. I got it down to about 10 minutes, and then the read aloud would take about 10 minutes as well. If you're not doing a morning meeting or a beginning of the class meeting, then I would say that this would last around 10 minutes. A lot of teachers have messaged me saying that they just don't have the time to fit it in, but I just felt that it was so beneficial that it was important that I did incorporate it. Now, I did not incorporate it every single day. Yes, ideally we would read a picture book a day, and the idea of Classroom Book a Day is to end up with having read 180 or however many days you're in school. You would read that many picture books. I simply didn't have time some days. Some days I could have made time and we just had to go on to something else. I'm proud that we did incorporate as many picture books as we did, and I'm happy with that. This coming school year, I hope to do a little bit better, but for my first year, I was happy with it. All that to say, if you don't incorporate a picture book every day, it's okay. Yes, that would be the best result possible, but if you incorporate more than you did the year before, I can't see where that's a bad thing. So just try at first and see if you can get it to work into your schedule. It will become easier the more times you do it, and the more times the kids do it, the faster it'll go. Now, I wanted to answer a couple of questions that y'all have been messaging me and asking me, so I'm going to post the question and then I'm going to post my response to it. I do not look at book levels. Yes, book levels are important to some degree, but for Classroom Book a Day and for how I did it in my classroom, I didn't care what level the book was. I read first grade books to my 5th graders. I read second grade books to my 5th graders. I didn't even look at the level half of the time. I don't care what level the book is. I just want the kids to enjoy the story. Now, for lessons, which was separate, I didn't do lessons in Classroom Book a Day. For lessons, yes, we used on-level text or a little below level text, whatever level my students are on. But for Classroom Book a Day, I just wanted them to enjoy the story and for us to have those texts look back as examples. I did not care what level it was. I didn't look at the level, but I did look at the maturity of the content. Some of the books that I read were too immature for my 5th graders. They were written more for first grade. Some of the stories my kids couldn't relate to. So I learned to look for the maturity of the content rather than the book level itself. Some books were leveled first grade, but the kids really enjoyed the story. And some books were leveled 3rd grade, but they were too immature for my 5th graders. So whatever your class's maturity level is how I would suggest you pick the books. Don't worry about the book level. If the kids enjoy the book, that's what matters. All this to say, it doesn't matter the level, it matters what the content is. Since incorporating picture books into my classroom, I have seen so many benefits. It made teaching theme so much easier because we discussed theme pretty much every day when we would read a picture book. So when it came time to actually do the lesson that was focused solely on theme and finding the central message of a story and finding evidence to support what you said the theme was, it made it so much easier. Usually when I teach theme, the kids have a hard time forming a theme in their mind. They say things that are about the characters or about that particular plot, and they don't form it in more of a broad, it can be applied to multiple stories or their life. They just go and stick with the character and the plot and the setting of that particular story. But since we did this with picture books every day and we talked about the theme, when we actually needed to focus on theme and do a lesson solely on theme, it was a lot easier. I credit that to picture books. After I incorporated genre books into Classroom Book a Day, it made teaching genres and the different types of genres so much easier. They were able to identify the types of genres and the differences between the different genres, and it made finding the genres of other stories that we would read so much easier because of picture books. It also gave us so many example texts to refer back to when we were doing lessons with on-level text. The kids could make text-to-text connections. They would bring up characters from picture books or problems, conflicts from picture books, themes. It really helped to have that many example texts to refer back to when we actually did lessons with on-level text. But most importantly, my kids loved it and enjoyed it and looked forward to it. For the picture books that I read during Classroom Book a Day, I do not use them for lessons. Yes, I may refer back to them in lessons, and I do that all the time, or I may use these as intro lessons, but I don't make a lesson out of the Classroom Book a Day. It's something separate from my actual focused lesson, whole group lesson, or whatever the focus for the day is. We just go back to the rug and we read a picture book and we enjoy that story. So while I use the picture books for example texts and maybe intro lessons, I don't actually center a lesson around that book. Now, if we were talking about a certain skill, I might find a picture book to read that day that lends itself to that. So if we were focusing on using the strategy SWBST to teach plot, I would pick a picture book to read that day that was good for finding plot with that picture book. I wouldn't pick a picture book that was focused more on a central character and determining the traits of that character and using, text evidence to, back up your opinion on that. I would do one more that lend itself to plot, if that makes sense. I don't have a master list, but that was a great idea. I'm just not that organized. I have been working on making lists for picture books that are good for teaching certain skills. I will leave the links down below for the 2 lists that I have created, one for picture books for teaching plot and one for picture books for teaching theme. And I'm working on characterization right now. But I'll leave the links down below if you want to check those out. If we're doing a novel study, yes, I still do a picture book at the beginning of class and then we go on with our lesson. And if it involves reading a novel, then those are two separate things. I used to do guided read alouds at the beginning of class and we would read a chapter or a few chapters from a chapter book, but I didn't do that any last year. Instead, I did picture book a day. You could do both if you had the time. I just chose to do picture books this year because I wanted to see if that would be more beneficial, and I liked doing that. I don't find anything wrong with doing read alouds. Those are fabulous. I love those. And if I had time to do both, I would so do that. But I teach 3 different classes a day and I only have them for about an hour and 10 minutes. So it's just not possible for me to do a picture book read aloud and a read aloud from a chapter book. If it is possible, I say go for it, because the more stories we can expose our kids to, the better. Sometimes I plan out what books we're going to be reading that week. Other times I just find a book and I'm really excited about it and I wanted to share it with my kids. If I'm teaching a certain lesson where I have a picture book that would go great for introducing that skill once we get into the whole group lesson, then I'll use it that day. Otherwise, I just pull what I want to read that day or what the kids are interested in, something along those lines. So sometimes I do schedule, sometimes I don't. I'm actually filming a video about this right after I filmed this one, so if it's up when I post this one, I will leave a link in the description below. If it's not, then I'll include the link as soon as it is posted. The number one worry when I started implementing Classroom Book a Day at the beginning of last year was that the kids were going to think that it was too babyish. I could just imagine them rolling their eyes when I told them to go to the rug for story time. I thought they were going to think that it was too babyish and that I had lost my mind. But they didn't. They loved it. Even the ones that were a little bit hesitant at the beginning grew to love it. And if I ever forgot to do one or we had to move it around and do it in a different part of class, they were quick to remind me. I taught 3 classes. I would read the same book to each class that day. Some classes responded better to the book than others. Sometimes one class would enjoy a book and another class wouldn't enjoy it as much. So it was really neat to see the reactions from the different classes and how they responded to the books. I did try to incorporate a lot of nonfiction. If you're a longtime follower of mine, you know that nonfiction is not my thing and I much prefer fiction, but nonfiction is so important, so I tried to incorporate those. Those books do tend to be a little lengthier than fiction picture books, so with those, sometimes it was just too long to, 1, have the time to read that picture book, and 2, hold the kids' attention for that amount of time. So when we had a lengthier nonfiction picture book, I actually would break it up into 2 days and we would read half the book one day and the rest of the book the next day. That worked out a lot better because lots of times those books would take 15, 20 minutes to read, and 1, I didn't have the time to do that, and 2, the kids couldn't sit down and listen for that long of time. So I broke it into 2 different days and that worked out really well. So that's how I do Classroom Book a Day in my classroom. I cannot say enough good things about incorporating picture books into an upper elementary classroom. I have found so many benefits to it. My kids enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It has made me fall in love with picture books again, and I know that my new group of kids will love to sit down on the rug as well. If you have a question about anything that I didn't answer, please leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it there. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more teacher related videos. See y'all.